Hey everyone, welcome back to the Phoenix Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Christo Scriven, and today I'm joined by Troy Karnes, a writer and cancer survivor in active recovery. Troy, last time we spoke, you were telling me how you were working on a book, and the title of the book is No Silver Bullets. Great title, by the way. What does that mean? What does no silver bullets mean?
Yeah, good question. That is the working title, and I'm right now as we speak revising the thing. So who knows? That might change, but it's a title that I really like and a concept that I really like, and it's the idea is that after going through like a handful of pretty difficult challenges over the last few years, I think that there's a lot of, well, what I see people do is I see people like trying to fix problems all the time, right? They're like solving problems, but every time they fix one, there's like three more that pop up, right? And a lot of the issues that a lot of the big issues that I ran into, there's no silver bullets, man. There's like no fix to them. Like these are issues that I will just constantly deal with throughout my life, and instead of trying to fix everything all the time, I've gotten much better results when I let go of that idea and just started to nurture them a little bit more and just kind of manage them a little bit at a time instead of looking for that one thing that's gonna like solve the problems, right? And so that's the idea behind no silver bullets, right? It's like, like there are certainly problems that do have silver bullets, right? Like you get a flat tire, you can fix it. That one's easy, right? But I think some of the biggest issues that we face on a daily basis just don't, right? There's no fix to them. For example, you probably ate today, right?
I did. Yes.
Yeah. What about yesterday?
I believe so. Yeah, I can't remember what I ate.
Got hungry yesterday, and I promise you will get hungry tomorrow too, right? Like, being hungry is just a thing that we have as humans, right? And it's going to happen every single day of our lives. And there's no way to end that, right? And so instead of looking for a bunch of quick fixes, just like embrace that and nurture it and pay attention to it a little bit at a time, and you'll end up with better results. Like I used to, I lost like 50 pounds. We just got back from Italy, so maybe it's more like 47 now, but I did a lot of that just by realizing like there's no like diet or whatever that I'm going to like blast through and take care of immediately. And it was really just like a change in mindset that allowed me to, eat a little bit better, take a little bit better care of myself. And, now I'm feeling way better. But, I find that quick fixes tend to just be quick and they don't tend to fix much. So that's the idea behind no silver bullets.
I love the visualization of that idea. No silver bullets. Like there's a werewolf and it's hunting you down. Like these are the problems that if we don't, I guess some problems, if we don't take care of them, then they can eat us. They can come and gobble us up. And have us for tea. And we want to kill those problems. And as swiftly, as quickly, and as easily as possible, like with a silver bullet. But there's, like you say, there's some things that are reoccurring. They're just parts of life that we just can't deal with. And they won't go away. There's no silver bullets. Yeah, that's really funny, really, to look at it like that. I think one of those things that just never goes away is the fact that the problem of having problems themselves, right?
Yeah.
There's a great story from the Buddha. It's called the 84th problem, where a man goes to the Buddha and he says, I have all these problems. And he lists out 83 problems. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, my wife's annoying me and my daughter's not doing what I say and the next door neighbor's making too much noise and all these problems. And the Buddha says to him, well, I have one more problem for you, the 84th problem.
Huh?
And it's that you believe you have problems and you're trying to fix
Sure.
them all.
Yeah.
But if you can accept reality as it is, then you will have no problems.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's, and that, I think that the point you said just before is that some of these things are not going away, and reframing them not as problems, but just as things that happen, I think is powerful. And when you can accept that, embrace that, and realize that, a lot of these things, and the most important things for me, I think, realizing that the most important things don't have immediate solutions. That was a powerful unlock. That was a powerful unlock.
Sure. How did you deal with that kind of mindset where so many people, I think, are looking for that quick fix? They're looking for a magic pill. They just want to say, go to the doctor and just no. And a lot of time, people go to the doctors, or if I've even thought like this in the past when I was younger, if I go to the doctors, they're just going to ask me about my sleep quality and my diet. And if I'm stressed, I don't, and I'm thinking, I don't want them to ask me about any of those things. I just want them to give me a pill.
Yeah.
That used to be my mindset.
Yeah.
How did you move past that?
Well, so I moved past it because in some ways I was forced to, because I was kind of the same way. And actually, I wasn't even that good because I just never went to the
Sure.
because a lot of times, whenever I'd go to the doctor, like, you break your arm, like easy, okay, like you'll get a cast, you'll get that fixed. But so many times you end up going to the doctor and they're like, well, yeah, I mean, you're sick and you'll get better in a few days. Right. So I just like stopped going to the doctor. Number one. But number two is I stopped going to the doctor because I didn't want to answer a lot of those questions. Right. Like I was overweight. I was unhealthy. Like there's so many things in my life. And it felt like maybe going to the doctor, I'd have to actually deal with those things. And I didn't want to. I was running away from them. And I got to a point where my drinking forced me to reckon with a lot of that. And that's where this idea really came from, because so I checked myself into a rehab facility, and the stats on people who make it through their first year of sobriety without relapsing are pretty awful.
Okay.
Like depending on the report or the study that you read, it's somewhere between like two-thirds and 85% of people who try to give up or try to overcome their addiction don't make it their first year without relapsing. And I asked my therapist about that in rehab, and I said, like, how do people fuck this up, right? And she said, well, people make bad decisions when they're hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And that's terrifying, right?
Sure.
Because everybody becomes we're those things all the time, because that's just part of being human, right? And so it made me think, like, yeah, well, of course nobody makes it, or very few people make it, because it's the helpful framework, right? So the framework is hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And
yes,
I like the framework. It's easy to remember. But the one that I had with it is that, the idea is that if you're kind of feeling out of sorts, think to yourself, like, okay, am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? And if so, then take care of one of those, like do something about those immediately. But if you think about it, man, that's asking a lot for somebody, like in a moment of weakness, to stop, consider that, and then make a good decision instead of a bad decision, right? A decision to not, in my case, or in the case of many addicts, it's like to use or to not use. And it felt like that would take a lot of willpower. And just, like, I didn't get to rehab by having great willpower, right? And so I thought about ways that I could use the framework in a bit of a different way and better to my advantage. And I thought, well, it was taught to me as a pretty reactive thing, right? Like you're feeling bad, react in this way and consider. But I thought, well, what if I could get ahead of that a little bit? Right? What if I could plan my days so I eat in a way that I'm not so hungry that I'm going to make a bad decision, right? What if I put some routines into my life so I'm processing my emotions regularly instead of bottling them up until they explode?
Sure.
What if I take my relationships a little bit more seriously and have a little bit more intent behind them so that I'm not feeling alone? And then what if I think about my sleep and exercise and energy in a way that I could keep it up all the time, so I can kind of keep the flywheel going? And that was really the start of it, right? Because none of those things have solutions, right? Like we talked about you getting hungry before, but the same thing is true for your emotions, right? Like you're gonna be up and down, and you're gonna feel the whole range of emotions, not just today, and you didn't just yesterday or the day before that, but you will the next day, the next day, and the next day. And the same thing with relationships, right? Like you'll have relationships your whole life, and you'll need to sleep. And so when you talk about sleep, man, it's so important. And so I just from that idea, from being a little bit more proactive, it led me to kind of a journaling routine. That's like, we can talk about the process a little bit, but a lot of it started with my journal and finding out and just figuring out a way where I could kind of keep track of those things and make sure that I had ways to signal to myself if I'm feeling a little bit out of sorts. Because a lot of times that happens, I think, before we recognize it or before we're able to, like, there are signs. And if we can put some markers in place to tell us when we need to start paying a little bit more attention to something, I have found that helped me tremendously.
It's like proper self-care, isn't it? Like you've got those 4 markers: hungry, angry, like your physiological consumption, you need energy; your emotions, you need to take care of those and keep them balanced, make sure you're connecting and having good relationships with people and actually genuinely connecting with people, and then making sure you're getting good rest, you're not burnt out or not getting enough sleep and things like that.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is it's kind of it's preventative. And I think a lot of the trouble comes from a dysfunctional way of living where we're not functioning just in the best way we can, because we know we're going to get hungry tomorrow, today. We know it's coming, but we maybe don't plan ahead enough for it. We don't know what to eat, and then we're hungry, and then we're like, oh, I'm hungry. And then you get angry, and then you're horrible to the person you love, which makes you lonely. And then you're exhausted by the end of it.
Yeah.
So
that's
being able to,
the
like,
thing.
having that journaling and those ways to plan ahead and make and have that awareness to realize, oh, these things are going to arise. How can I counteract them from actually arising? What are the sort of things, like what kind of journaling exercising and things like that would you do?
Yeah. And so the journaling is a little bit different than kind of a journal that I had always thought of traditionally, right? Because it does fold all these things in. I think that your point there is, I'm glad you made it, because it is kind of the whole thing. Like none of this exists in a silo, right? Like you can't just take care of your diet, or you can't like just go to therapy, or like all of these things exist together, and you nailed it, right? Like, yeah, you get hungry, and your food and mood are massively interconnected. And if you don't manage those things, then yeah, your relationships go to shit, and then it snowballs, right? But you can work it the other way too. So like, here's how my journal works. It takes about 2 minutes to do a lot of the heavy lifting in the journal. And then there's like a longer where I write about some prompts. And I'll go into that too, because like the system that I put together there. But the journal does a couple of things. Number one, it's like, what day is it? Then I have I let me okay. So it goes like this. What day is it, right? And then I track how many days sober I have, because
Okay.
that's like a big project, and that'll continue for the rest of my life. Um,
Sure.
and then I say, like, how did I sleep? How did I sleep last night? And I rate that on a scale of 1 to 4. Um, Side note, I love the 1 to 4 scale. I think
Okay.
it's I think really important. We could come back to it. I think it's super interesting. But yeah, how did
Uh-huh.
I sleep 1 to 4? Then I say, okay, what's one goal that I have for tonight? It has to be something I'm
Yeah.
going to finish that day. It has to be something, I like to use that as something that's like a little bit of a pebble in my shoe, right? Something that I've been maybe pushing off a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I do that, and then I reflect, like, okay, did I accomplish yesterday's? Yes, sir.
Mm.
Right. So did I accomplish yesterday's goal, and what's my goal tonight?
Okay. Yeah.
Then I write down what I ate the day before, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't count calories. I don't do any of that. It's really just kind of the headlines, right? So breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack, and I write down the workout that I did the day before and how long I did that. Uh, and so all of that is kind of like just like 90 seconds. Um, how did I do? And what was and rank the day before? Like, how was my day? 1 to 4.
Mhm.
And so
Okay.
by that, you're tracking mood, tracking sleep, tracking what I ate, and then having a daily goal. And and that all happens so fast. Like, it sounds like a lot when I say it out loud, but like, if I were to ask you all those questions, we'd be done in 90 seconds, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's quite
And
simple.
yeah,
Simple points to go through. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So that's super fast. And then
Mhm.
I have a writing session that is a little bit more of a traditional kind of journal, right? Where I take 15 minutes or so, and I write on a prompt. And that's massively important, because one of the other things that trips people up, is ruminating, right? Like, man, I always
Mm.
had like the mind spinning. Ethan Kross, who's a psychologist at the University of Michigan, has a great book called Scatter, and he opens it explaining that we have 6,000 words a minute can go through our minds when we're thinking that,
Wow.
and most of them are not positive. There's a
Sure. Yeah.
lot of negative inner voice, right?
Mhm.
And so 6,000 words a minute is also it's almost too many to process.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You If you compare that with the number of words we speak out loud,
Mhm.
we speak at like 125 or 135 words a minute versus 6,000, right?
Mhm.
Now you're getting to more of a speed. And think about it, I mean, that's how we mainly communicate with each other as people, right? Like, that is a
Mhm.
speed where we can process a little bit better. If you're typing, that's like 75, 85 words a minute, much slower, easier to
Mhm.
process. And if you're writing by
Mhm.
hand, now you're like 13 words a minute.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, right. Okay. So that part of that unlocks the power of writing. And
Mhm.
James Pennebaker is a professor at the University of Texas, and he really pioneered the research on how good writing is for processing your emotions. His
Mhm.
work is massively interesting because he found that when people, like, transforming your thoughts to language helps you understand them better. And when you can do that, there's all sorts of benefits. I mean, it helps your biological health, can help your relationships, uh, help your mindset, and I found that to be incredibly true. I found his research after I started doing this,
Okay.
and now it makes a lot
Yeah.
more sense about why it works for me, right? Um,
Sure.
because I
It's.
mean, I had thoughts that just spun and spun and spun and spun and spun, and
Mhm.
then when I started writing every day, that went away by and large.
Wow,
But it
that's
sounded like you were
great.
going to say something. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
It's something that we hear a lot about journaling, writing daily, and it's one of those foundational things that I think we can forget how powerful and impactful it actually is. In your experience, on a scale of 1 to 10, how impactful has just that habit of daily journaling or writing been for you? Is it the number one thing, would you say, that's helped you to overcome the issues you were facing?
Yeah, if I had to cut self care routines out of my life, that would be the last one.
Okay, sure, sure.
It's the number one
Let's
thing I would.
okay, let's take a step back and kind of go back to the beginning or before this journey. So you said you had a problem of drinking. You checked yourself into rehab. So you, things either must have got quite bad, or you just had a lot of self awareness to get yourself in there. Um, but what was going on?
I
What
wish
led up to that?
I wish
What
I
led up
had
to
the
that
self
point?
awareness. Yeah.
What led up to that point?
Oh man. Okay. So it's a funny thing, right? Because now I can see all of these things in the past that I couldn't see at the time. But the thing that really ended up driving me there is that I finally realized that like this was not a thing that I was going to be able to do on my own. Moderation was not a thing that I could do. And it all came to a head. So I used to my whole adult career I worked in the alcohol sales business, right? And so yeah, so it was like around, and like you don't get into that business if you don't like drinking, right? Um,
Mm,
and that for me, was really good for a long time. Like, it's like it's hard for me to go back and say like drinking was awful and ruined my life, because I don't think that's true. Like in many ways, I was pretty successful. Maybe not because of my drinking, but like in selling alcohol. Like, it's an industry that I did pretty well in. Uh, but it certainly got to a point where, it went from having like, positive benefits in my life to neutral to absolutely negative, and,
mm.
hurting not only my career, but my marriage and my relationships and everything else. And so, um, yeah, I don't know when we started, but like maybe a decade ago, I would stop drinking for February. Lots of people do dry January now, or,
Mhm.
a lot of people maybe are going to finish up sober October. Uh, as
Mhm.
we're recording this at the end of October, I don't know when it'll come out, but that's what we're talking. And, um, and I needed that month as a little bit of a reset, right? Like holidays are big drinking time. So you go through a few months of pretty heavy consumption, food and drink.
Mhm.
And so I take February off, right? Off the soft February, I called it. And what happens, it's pretty interesting. What happens is, our bodies um, tend to bounce back fairly quickly, like from a detox. You stop drinking, you start feeling a lot better. But our minds are much slower. So then so then March 1st, right? Which off the sauce February is done. And in my mind, it was like, oh, okay, well, to feel good, it's, 4 drinks or 5 drinks, whatever that number is, right? Uh, your body now doesn't need that much to feel the effects, but your mind
Oh
tells you
yeah.
that you do, right?
Mm.
Your mind is more resilient in that way, and that's how people end up like, going from. You hear a lot of people who take a break and then they get right back in, and it's massively damaging because they try to consume at the same level they were before, but their tolerance has gone down when they walked away from it. And that would
Mm.
happen to me every 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 month. like, yeah, it's funny. Like you talk about self-awareness, but like clockwork, right? And the year that I decided to stop drinking, well, this all it all gets worse because my wife's birthday is in March and early in March. And so
Okay.
yeah, so I would be like, yeah, in pretty bad shape for her birthday. And that year I ended up missing her birthday dinner. I got reservations at the coolest, fanciest, hottest restaurant in the city. And, I just, it was like a Saturday. I was cleaning the house and, nothing else to do. So why not have a couple of cocktails? Cause I was excited and,
Uh,
uh, yeah, had like too many, had to miss her birthday dinner. It was pretty awful, pretty big rupture in our relationship. And, and then so I said, okay, well, let me take some time and think about this because it was clear to me that I needed a plan because things were getting out of control. And, I came up with like it in retrospect, like one of the dumbest ideas ever. But I said, I remember I was sitting on the couch. I said, I was like, "All right, I have an idea. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take $10,000. I'm going to put it in our joint bank account. And that is like my keep me accountable money, right? And in a year, when I show you that I can manage this on my own, I want to use that money and to go on a big vacation to Iceland, kind of a, like dream vacation for us, right?
okay.
They said, and if I fuck up, you can. And uh, and I didn't last a month. I didn't last a month.
Wow. Yeah.
We went
You're
to
not that money motivated.
I thought I
Mm,
was, and that's why I thought that it was going to work.
sure.
But no, man, I'm like less than a month after there was I had a work dinner. We went out, overdid it, woke up the next day, uh, just super hungover, right?
Mhm.
And then started drinking during the day to, uh, it was like a little medicine, right? Feel, to get myself right sided. And
Sure.
she recognized it, called me out. I told her no, I was just hungover, and uh, but then I passed out. I passed out in a Zoom meeting. I had it was because it was a Monday, and she smacked me. They're like, "What the fuck are you doing? You're gonna get fired." What? And she said, "I already packed your bag, and I called an Uber to take you to a hotel, and you can't be here like this."
Okay.
And yeah, so she kicked me out. I didn't know for how long.
Okay.
But that night I called a few treatment facilities and checked myself in, and 3 days later went into rehab
Wow. Okay.
because it
So,
was yeah. I mean, it was clear, right? Like I was like it was the moment really when I was like I can't, like I clearly cannot do this without.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So you tried it on your own, failed. Doesn't sound like you had to go through too many attempts of trying it on your own. Tried a few, but I
It was
think
like a constant thing that I would try to moderate, right?
okay.
And I think that there's a creeping feeling that
Um,
it was getting out of control, but those thoughts have addiction has a way to turn the volume down on those thoughts. Um,
sure, yeah. Well, you go into one of those states of hungry, angry, lonely, tired, and that's your coping mechanism, right? And
Mhm.
I think so many people come into substance addictions through seeking a high. So they're at the works dinner or whatever it is, and maybe they're having a few drinks, and maybe it moves on to something more hardcore, and that's how they get introduced to that. But then there's this high moment, But then when that person then goes into a low, because they found they were at this high point and they've used this substance to get themselves even higher, right?
Yep.
And now they're in a low, so their brain goes, oh, that thing made me feel better previously, so
Yeah.
maybe it will make me feel better now. So when you're in the low, you try and use it again, and then it becomes this like neurotic coping mechanism. It's not healthy. It doesn't help anything. It's completely dysfunctional, and it just spirals you further down. But for some reason, your brain just thinks, let's keep going, you know, because it's an escape and it's more comfortable
Mm-hmm.
than the alternative, being in one of those states that you don't enjoy being in. For you, did you get introduced to alcohol in that way? Was it something that was a high that you used to enjoy? Like you said, that it was something that had positive effects, and then they kind of the positive effects dwindled, and then it was just a completely negative thing.
Yeah, exactly. It was, I was not a drinker when I was super young. Like I wasn't an underage drinker. Uh, but yeah, so like going to happy hours and socializing
Mm.
and it always kind of got associated with good times with friends, right? Uh, and then I like the feeling, I like the feeling that it gave me. And so then, a little turned into a little more, turned into a lot, turned into too much.
Mm. Sure. When you were in the hotel room, talk me through like the thought process. Like your wife has just kicked you out. You
Yeah.
promised her you would stop. "Yeah, I'm gonna make it for a year, babe. I'm not gonna drink for a year. Here's 10 grand. I know I can do it. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna give up 10 grand for a bit of
Yeah.
alcohol. Obviously, that's a lot of money. And then within a month, you say you start drinking. She's like, get out. Yeah, yeah. What's going through your head? What's the thought process that made you think, shit, I'm gonna actually get some help now?
Well, I think I was at that moment really staring down a future without my family.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the thing that scared me out of it. Is in that moment in the hotel room, like I didn't know when I'd make it home. I didn't know if, like divorce was around the corner. I didn't know, but it seemed like it was. And it seemed like it definitely was if I didn't take drastic action in that moment, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And uh then my mom actually drove to the hotel and just like, called me. I don't even know how many her calls I ignored along the way. Uh, and then I thought, I could eat something. I haven't eaten. I'm drunk and I need to eat. And so I walked out of the front door and her car was there and it was just on. She was like crocheting, I think, just like just waiting for me. What an act of love. Um,
Mm.
and I talked to my uncle who helped me a lot, and he's like, you gotta go get help. And I said, like, I clearly don't have the answers here, so I'll just listen. I'll just listen and follow directions. Um, and so I went back up to the room and laid there and just said like, okay, like just Google basically. Googled
Mm.
some rehab facilities, and then I got one that was recommended to me by my aunt, and that's ultimately where I ended up going. Um, but what else was going through my mind? The other things that were going through my mind then was like, man, that this is like a day that will be like a marker in my life. Like there will be before and after, because I thought for sure like I would just have to quit my job in an industry that I had been in my whole career, which is pretty terrifying, right? Like I didn't know another industry. That was kind of it for me. And so, yes, just a lot of fear that night, a lot of fear and humiliation for sure.
Okay, yeah, humiliation to do with family and loved ones and things like that, seeing you.
Yeah, absolutely. I had, kind of it like snapped into focus in that moment, like the pain that I had caused, and it sounds so simple, right? Like stop, just drink one beer, not 10, right? It sounds so simple, but I couldn't do it. And that carried some shame for me because it sounds so simple. It's not. It is not. It is not that simple, but it sounds simple. And the fact that I couldn't figure it out was incredibly humbling and humiliating in that moment.
What do you think that is when people just can't control their drink, when they just have to, they just take it too far every time? I've been like this in the past, and I don't drink now. I can have a more healthy relationship with it. I can drink several times a year, say, and I don't drink too much.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm really grateful for that I've made that progress in that way, because I used to be a heavy binge drinker. I
Yeah.
wasn't drinking like every day, but when I was younger, it was like every weekend, and it would be
Yeah.
binging, but like
Yeah.
heavily, which is such an British culture to
Mm,
go out
yeah.
on the town on the weekends, and I know in the States it's more like go to the bars, happy hour, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think that is? Where's like in your recovery, did you kind of look into that, uncover that at all? But what makes people just not be able to stop, to take it too far?
Yeah. Good question. I think there's a couple answers there. I think there's a genetic component to it.
Mm,
And, part of it's like, somebody said to me one time, like, yeah, well, because you had a virus in your brain, right? That that switch got flipped, and that was kind of that, right? And I think some of that's certainly how it felt and how it
mm,
feels. Like there's just something that I couldn't, like just couldn't. And so I think that's part of it. I think coupled with I wasn't doing any of the other things to take care of myself, right? Like I was not eating well. I did not prioritize my sleep. I was stuffing my emotions and not dealing with them. Uh, I was
mm.
clearly not being open and honest with the people in my life, and so I think some of my relationships were suffering because of it. Uh, and I felt this need to like outwardly show that I had my shit together at all times,
Hmm.
and it prevented me from asking for help, right? And so I
Yeah,
think
sure.
combining those two things was incredibly powerful and not something that I was able to overcome without some help.
So once you start drinking, it's kind of this it's kind of like a death spiral, where, because when people say when you're drunk, the truth comes out, and that's also the truth of our own emotions, I think, as well, right? We
Mhm.
start to actually feel things that we've buried, and then the only way we know how to deal with those things is just to keep drinking.
Yeah.
um it's such a interesting phenomenon. I think, like you say, genetics definitely plays a part into it. uh and people have a different reaction to alcohol than other
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
for sure. In my program that we work with people, there's an exercise that we do called values hierarchy, where you
Mhm.
list out all your most important values, and then you rank order them in levels of importance.
Sure.
And then we have people reflect on how much time and energy, like thought energy, how much importance they've actually been giving it in their psyche and in their life. So if they
Yeah.
put their most important thing is, say, their health or mental health, whatever it might be, and then it's like family, then it's exercise, something like
Yeah.
those sorts of things, those really meaningful things that people put at the top. And then when people reflect on what they're actually spending all their
Yeah.
time and energy on, those things are like nowhere near the top. And the thing that they've been spending all their time and energy on probably isn't even on the list.
Sure.
Like
Right.
if in
Yeah.
that state back then, I would have asked you, like, what, write down all your values. Would you have written alcohol? Unlikely. You might have written like fun or like social, but the like things that you associated alcohol with, that you could find those things in other activities, which I'm sure you have now since then. But for some reason, when we're in one of those states, we are just, we have all these wires crossed, and it's such a cliche thing to say that addicts are selfish. Like, oh, they're just selfish. They're
Mhm.
just selfish. And I don't like that at all. Not one
Yeah.
bit. But me, I identify as an addict. And one of the biggest things, if not the biggest thing, is selfishness, self-centeredness.
Yeah.
Because if I was genuinely thinking of other people and their needs and not just my own self and what I needed or thought I wanted, would I do half the shit that I did that was self-destructed? Genuinely, would I do that? If I'm thinking about my partner, my family, my colleagues, anything like that, would I do all those things, or is it just me really focusing on what I want? And when you were talking then about that humiliation, and it puts those things into perspective, I'll go, I've been thinking about myself, and look how this has affected all these different people, and how much pain it's bringing them to see me in this way potentially.
Yeah.
And it puts so much in perspective. So since then, you've been sober from alcohol. This is only one part of your story, I understand, of course, but how much of a difference in your life have you felt from being free of alcohol?
Yeah. Good question. And the answer is maybe one that we don't hear very often, but here's the, like, getting sober didn't like fix everything in my life. Right.
Mm,
And what it
sure.
did though was it left me able to deal with all of the shit that's still there. Right. Like all of
Um,
the problems that I was using alcohol to escape didn't go away because I stopped
mm,
drinking. Those problems still exist. Right. But now I'm just able to deal with them more directly and in a healthier way. Right. So one of the things that I tell people is like, man, if I could, if I could just reduce rehab into one sentence, it would be like training yourself about healthy and unhealthy ways to deal with the shit that happens to us in our life,
mm,
and to recognize some cognitive biases that we have and maybe healthier ways to reframe our experiences. And that's one of the things, like when you think about HALT, right? Like people don't make good decisions when they're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, right? And that's not just true for addicts, by the way. Nobody does. And so I expected to go into rehab to get treatment specifically for addiction. And I would say that
mm,
that's like 5% of what happened there, right? The other 95% of it was getting treatment for being a human. And so
mm,
by taking all of the tools that I learned out of rehab, like they're still helping me so much, even well, because I'm not drinking anymore, right?
mm,
Uh, but I think it's even more than that, right? Like I feel like there's a decent chance I could have avoided it all if I had these tools beforehand.
Mm.
Right. And so, I'm more equipped now to, deal with whatever comes my way than I was before. And not drinking is vital to that. For me, it's essential. But the tools that I learned there aren't just for addicts. Like everybody should be following these, or could benefit, I should say, um, by a lot of the lessons learned there.
It's an interesting point to reflect back and say, if I had the tools before, I probably could have done it myself. And whether the rock bottom, the rock bottom that people hit before they actually commit to recovery, many people have to hit multiple, right? And when people say, the good thing about rock bottom is the only way you can go is up. I kind of, this voice in the back of my head says, well, hell is a bottomless pit, so I'm not sure. There's multiple levels down there. You don't know how deep you can go.
Yeah.
And it's often pain, a vast amount of pain, and a vast amount of fear that really motivates you to think, right, I'm actually going to sort this out. And propels you far enough to keep going then in that direction.
Yeah.
And is that something that still motivates you or keeps you committed, that feeling of the remembrance of the potential fear of loss of your family and the pain that idea brought?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, certainly. And there's, one other thing is I can say, like, as I hear myself saying, like, oh man, if I had these tools before, maybe I could have avoided rehab and all that. Like, part of me is like, oh, that is 1000% the addict in the back of my brain being like, oh, all these things now. Like, it's probably going to be okay, right? But I'm also like well trained enough to know that maybe that's bullshit. Or I better not try, right? But yeah, I think that my family's like a massive motivator for me, and even more now than it was then. And yeah, I mean, it's like you talk about like values, like that's the most important thing. It's at the top. It's at the top of my list, and I am now spending way more time and energy on that than I was before, and for better.
Going back to the HALT idea, the hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Yeah.
You can try to prevent those things as much as possible, but sometimes you are going to end up in one of those states. And like you said, if you end up in one of those states, you're probably likely to make a bad decision. But what can you do if you are in that place? It's a precarious, dangerous state to be in, because that's where you're likely to relapse, say. What can you do to make the right choice?
So I'm a massive advocate for, prevention first, right? And so that's why I set my journal up that way, so that hopefully they're not all happening at the same time, right? Like we have all the feelings at the same time. That's when things can get, be dangerous. But part of it is having, like a little bit of a canary in the coal mine, right? So for me, for example, I mentioned that I write down kind of what I eat every day, like, oh, what I have for breakfast. But I also rank those like on a scale of 1 to 4, right? Like how on plan was that of what I'd like to be eating, and I can tell. I see to my eating before I feel it if something is wrong. And so if I see myself like my diet goes to fit, I say like, oh, there must be something else happening here, right? And then I can use my writing to examine that a little more closely and get myself back on track. And sometimes it's the sleep. And one of the cool things about scoring the, my mood and my sleep and things like that is it goes I put all that into a spreadsheet and then it spits out a graph, right? And
Okay.
so you can see how the things are correlated. And, there's a lot of research about, about people who try to lose weight and everything, that
Mhm.
one big tool is seeing it on a graph. Like graphs impact you. Uh, and so
Mm.
by putting my my mood and my sleep and everything like on and my daily goals like on a graph, I can see visually how I'm doing and if I need to adjust a little bit, right? Uh, so that's number one, right? Is to try to prevent um, those kind of bad times as much as possible. Now you're right. There, you can't avoid every single one of them.
Mhm.
But and then the idea is to have a plan when you're in a bad place and to have practiced that plan beforehand, right? So, for example, for people in recovery, they call it the 800-pound telephone. It's hard to pick up and tell somebody like, "Hey, man, I need some help because I feel like I want to drink right now."
Mm.
And right, but they call it the 800 because it's hard to pick up, right? And one of the things that I've done that's been massively enjoyable is calling somebody. I try to call a friend every day just to say
Okay.
hello, right?
Mm.
You talk about quick fixes versus not. Like the text message is a quick fix, right? But make a phone call, make an 8-minute phone, and you will feel massively better, right? It's like,
Mm.
I've never done ayahuasca, but it's like doing ayahuasca in a cold plunge, on your fat, like whatever, all of it, it's like doing all of that at once. It's just calling somebody to connect. And if you
Mm.
have that habit, if you have that good habit when you're feeling good, then you'll know how to use it when you're feeling, but you can't build the system when you're like, you can't build the plane when it's going down in flames, right? Like you kind of have to have it ahead of time and you have to practice those good habits when you feel good. And I think it's one of the issues that, um, why people have a hard time making it through a year of sobriety. Like, people who I know who have, worked to overcome their addictions. There's like a pretty dangerous window from like month like 4 to 8 or 9 when they start to feel a little overconfident, like they've got it. I certainly,
Mm.
I certainly felt that way. And sometimes then those routines start to fall away a little bit because
Mhm.
they think like, oh, I got this. I don't need to do that. I don't need to, whatever it is, for me, it would be like waking up and writing my journal. Like, oh, I don't, like I'm feeling pretty good. Like, I don't need that anymore to prop me up. Uh, but in fact, that's sort of forgetting the fact that the writing or whatever that routine is the reason that I'm feeling good. And if you take that away, then it gets a lot harder. So, number one, I would say like how we can do, like just like call somebody every day. It's feeling connected to people is incredibly important, in so many ways. Nearly half of Americans now do not have 3 close friends.
Yeah, that's
In
scary.
1990, in
Mm.
1990, it was like half is like 27%. Right. So,
Okay. Mm.
and there's massive implications for our biological health, like our blood pressure, stress, mental disorders. People with more than 3 friends have less depression and anxiety. Um, and, you can work on that by just like keeping connected. And I think that we have this feeling like, oh, I don't want to bother anybody. But I promise you, your friends will be excited to see you and they will
Mm.
be happy that you called just to say hello. If you think about all the things you have 8 minutes on your walk or sitting in traffic or whatever, and it can be a massive boost to your day and to their day because they'll feel good too. Uh, and and so maybe that was a little bit of a ramble on what to do when you're not feeling good, but like when you're feeling super down and connect with somebody. Um, that's the answer. To connect with somebody. Second part of that is, get in the habit of doing that when you're feeling good so that when you feel bad, it doesn't feel like such a heavy lift. You get over all those fears of like, I don't know what to say. I don't know who to call. I don't, it becomes part of your routine, and that makes it a lot easier when you're struggling.
Sure, yeah. It's like the opposite end of that coping mechanism where you learn a behavior in a high. Say you've learned alcohol makes you feel even happier when you're happy. And
Mm-hmm.
then if you're practicing making a call to someone and it makes you, oh, do you know what? I'm actually happy. This is great. I'm just connecting with people in a genuine, authentic way. And I feel connected now. And practicing that, your brain
Yeah.
automatically will think, oh, that's the thing that's going to make me feel better, not this other thing. And practicing that over the previous action is, yeah, really crucial. I think that's a really great answer. And what you talked about earlier as well about the journaling and using
Mm-hmm.
words,
Yeah.
speaking is the same
Mm-hmm.
in many ways, right? You don't have a catalog of it. Like a journal is like a second brain because you can go back and read your thoughts from a year ago and remember them with perfect clarity. But you can't
Mm-hmm.
do that necessarily with a conversation unless you're on a podcast, of course. And then it's
Here
catalog.
forever. Yeah.
Yeah, which is great. Imagine listening back to this in 20 years' time and reflecting about how far we've come or
Yeah.
what a high this was in our lives. Who knows where we'll end up?
Sure.
But I'm intending for the good. But like you said, when you speak, you're speaking at only a certain amount of words per minute. So, and when you speak, you have to make sense.
Yeah.
And I talk about this quite a lot actually as well. And I saw you making a video about this on LinkedIn about the use of words to make sense of your own thoughts and your emotions. And I think that's really a big part of why talking therapy works, right? When you're caught up in emotion or you're in a dysfunctional state where you're kind of traumatized and your response to everything is that limbic flight, fight, fear, fawn, freeze response. And the neocortex is a huge part of it is used for language processing, right? So when you talk about the experience that you're having, which is arising from that part of the brain, the old brain,
Mhm.
I kind of conceptualize it literally like you're pulling out your consciousness out of that part of the brain and into the conscious part of the brain, the self-aware part of the brain that can make sense of things. And through talking, like we are now, you have to make sense. So you can make sense of the chaos that's within those confines of your mind just through stringing together a few sentences. And
Yeah, and
for
we
me,
see this when we try to teach something to somebody, right?
mm,
I'm sure you've all had that feeling where it's like, oh yeah, like I completely understand this. Like maybe it was back in school and you're like working on a math problem and you're like, oh yeah, I got this down. But then your friend asks like, oh hey, can you help me with it? And then you start to explain it to them and you're like, well shit, maybe I don't quite get it. And so by speaking out loud, you understand the things that you don't understand. And
yeah,
it gives you an opportunity to kind of work through those to make sense of them. And
sure,
so,
yeah,
and so the same is true. It's not just true for math, or it's not just true for like, trying to teach somebody, but it's a little cliche, but when you say like the best way to learn something is by teaching it. And the reason
yes,
is because by teaching it, you have to kind of fully understand it. And you have to say it out loud to somebody, right? You
it
have to
totally makes sense.
transform the things that you think you'll understand into language. And that makes
There's been a few times when I've thought something and I think it's a really good idea, and then when I say it out loud, I realize how ridiculous it is and stupid. So
yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's definitely true.
yeah,
Where you go, oh, yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, that will work. Yeah. And then you say it out loud and you go, oh, no, that completely doesn't make sense.
yeah.
Yeah. And that goes to show how important that is. And I think journaling is really important as well. Some people find journaling easier because there's not that social
Mhm.
awkwardness or anxiety. People
Yeah,
feel like they're going to get judged by the person on the other end of the phone, maybe, or something like
yeah,
that.
sure.
But I think some people are the opposite, where they feel like it's easier to just have a conversation with someone rather than sit there and write. I think you just have to do whatever works for you, mainly. You also have to just do what works as well. You can't just say, "Oh, I like this part and not that part." But I think what we're getting at here is self-awareness mainly,
Yes.
right? And through having honest, open conversations with other people, uh, you can bring that about. But do you think the quality of the conversation matters, or is it just the connection? Because sometimes in my life, I find that I'm talking to someone, and there's something in my mind that is really what's weighing on my mind and my heart, but I'm not
Mhm.
expressing it. I'm just having this
Yeah.
kind of superficial surface level conversation, and I come away and I don't really feel connected. So do you think it matters?
I think it depends on the moment. My wife makes
Mm,
fun of me all the time because I will go hang out with my friends and she'll come back and she'll say, "Oh, like what are they up to? What's happening in their life?" Like I have no idea. But if we were watching the game, so we talked about the
mm,
game, right?
mhm,
Or we were doing whatever, so we were talking about that activity. And I don't think that diminishes the experiences that I'm having with my friends in those moments because we are connecting
mhm,
and feeling like we're together. But there are other times when you do need to connect with somebody in a deeper, more authentic way. And in many ways, if you haven't built the relationship, sometimes through seemingly superficial interactions with them, you're not comfortable enough to share those things, right? Like you just said, like, oh, I
mhm,
can, in the conversation, you are noticing that there's something bigger, but you hold for some reason. And some
mhm.
of that might be because you haven't built up a level of comfort with that person to the point where you feel okay exposing yourself to them.
Mm, sure.
And so I
For
think you need
me,
them. I think you need them, right? Like
yeah,
because
yeah.
at the same time, right? Like what if you were going to do the opposite? What if you said I'm only having deep conversations with people? Like
Mhm,
that also is not everybody is ready for that type of conversation every time. So I think it's good to vary it. I do think that we could have deeper and more thoughtful conversations more often than we think. I think we do get a little bit scared off. Um, and Super Communicators by Charles Duhigg is a great book, and he mentions that we can have more deep conversations than we have, and we scare ourselves out of it, and we shouldn't. I do believe that. I think he's got a good point there, but I do think that having a variety of kind of levels of depth in your connections is good.
I think what you said, that where if you go and hang out with some of your buddies and you're watching the game and you have something to communicate around and talk about, that's not just stuff in your own head and in your own life. It takes you outside of yourself, and uh, I think that's a really healthy way to. The word escape is coming to mind, like a healthy way to escape, and I don't
Yeah.
think escapism is always inherently bad. I think even like people talk about spiritual practices, in a sense it's still an escape, because you're trying uh to release yourself from the grips of the problems in your reality, and it is kind of escape. Maybe it's a healthier escape, and maybe that's what we're getting at here. There's healthy and unhealthy ways to deal with things, and but maybe they're all kind of escapes. When you're hanging out with your buddies, though, are they still drinking? How do you find that kind of situation? If there's people around you drinking, you're like, I don't drink anymore. Do you find that difficult, or have you got used to it now?
At this point, it's fine. I feel pretty good in my sobriety right now, and so I don't. That doesn't bother me now.
Hmm.
What I will say is that I have an incredibly great group of friends who uh, will take me into account, right? So it's like
Hmm.
whenever we're hanging out, and it's more like um, like birthday parties or whatever now, it's like they always make sure that, there's not just alcohol, right? Like there's something else. But it's not just that. I've noticed that a lot of my friend group now is kind of used my experience as a way to reflect on their own relationship with alcohol and tone it down a little bit. And so, yeah, I have, I have a great and supportive group of friends. And, the friends who were like just drinking friends are gone now, but like they weren't really adding that much, is what I found, you know?
Okay, sure. They weren't really friends, just kind of drinking buddies.
Yeah.
If someone was going through recovery or just working, maybe they haven't got to the rock bottom and they're working on things themselves and they are making some headway, but would you have any advice for someone that was going into those social situations where people kind of expecting you to drink because that's the normal thing and they haven't really thought about the best way to communicate the fact that they're not drinking, and they don't want people to kind of try and talk them out of it because they're not completely clear on why they're doing it. They just know that it's not the healthiest thing they want to do. They want to cut back. It's having like negative consequences in their lives in some way. But what would you say to someone who's having those experiences and finds them uncomfortable?
Yeah, good question. So, there's a few strategies there, right? Like n- number one is set yourself up and put yourself into good situations. So if you are going to a party where you know there's going to be a lot of drinking and you're going to be pressured into it and everything, like consider not going. Like the best way to regulate your emotions is to create situations and to be in places where you feel good. And so if you're, purposefully putting yourself in a situation where you're not going to be comfortable, I would say think about that first. Now, the counter to that is, well, then I won't see my friends anymore. And that's also not good. But then, but then I would say, like, like those are conversations that you can have with your friends, probably not at the drinking party, right? That's probably a conversation for another time. And that's really what I would say is, like one of the best things that I did to make sure that I was able to stay sober, especially through that first year, was I told everybody. Like I built in layers and layers and layers of social accountability, um, to the point where then it was expected of me that I wasn't gonna be drinking, right? Um, and
Okay.
by saying it out loud to somebody else, it makes it real, not just for me, but for them. And it started to become part of my identity. And like I said to people who like just like I forced it into conversations because part of it is because I wanted to change my identity in some ways as
Uh-huh.
from heavy drinker to non-drinker. That part of my identity, I wanted to change. And saying it out loud, like if you keep it a secret, then you're the only one keeping yourself accountable, and we're very good at lying to ourselves.
Mm.
But when it's open and you share it with somebody else, then I'm accountable to myself, but I'm also accountable to what I told somebody else, and I don't want to be made a liar. I also hope that if I said it to enough people, if there was a moment when I asked for a drink, somebody might say something like, "I thought you weren't drinking." Something to just make me pause for 1 second. Like it's almost like a two-factor authentication, right? Like you're trying to get into a website and it says, okay, but hold on, let me make sure that this is actually you. Uh,
Shit.
right? Like,
Mm.
and
Uh-huh.
a lot of times you need like 8 seconds to pause so I was trying to force a second decision if I ever
Mm.
got to the point where I was asking for a drink. Um, and so, I think it's like being open, but it's hard to be open just at that moment. Like if you're surprising people, like, oh, I'm not drinking today, especially when you're kind of pigeonholed as somebody who does, that makes it really, really hard. So have the conversation ahead of time, you know?
Mhm. Be clear, communicate, and I was gonna say swallow the shame, but like, how did you deal with that? Because I think that's something that people deal with a lot. Want to talk about this last issue, and then we'll move on to something else past
Yeah.
the drinking. But yeah, how do you how did you deal with that when you were communicating with other people like that didn't know the whole story, what was going on? And you say, "Yeah, I'm not drinking." They're like, "Oh, why not?" "Oh, come on, man! Like, let's have a drink." And you're like, "Okay, no, like how deep did you go with every person? Did you tell everyone the whole story, or was it just like, look, there's stuff that happened, and I'm not drinking anymore. Hope you understand."
Yeah.
Or like, how deep do you go, and how did you deal with that? Was it something that you experienced, the shame, talking to other people? And how did you deal with it if you did?
Yeah. So, I think right now it's like the golden age of getting sober, right? Like this 10 years ago would have been way more difficult, but there's a lot of conversation now about
Mm,
moderating consumption. And so the conversation I don't think is as awkward as it used to be. So
hmm
that's a benefit of mine that I have right now. Um, and I think words are important there because I think there's a difference in telling somebody like, oh, I'm not drinking right now versus saying like, oh no, I'm sober.
hmm
That word carries a little bit more. Uh, yeah, it just carries more, right? It's a little bit more
Sure.
powerful in terms of like
Yes.
kind of a rule that you have set for yourself, right?
hmm
And people do tend to respect rules. And this is, like Tim Ferriss talks about this a lot in like, oh no, I have a rule. Like I don't take meetings on this or I don't invest in that. Or
Yeah.
it's just like a rule, right? So it's like you just tell people like, oh no, I'm sober. You can, and I found that an attaching to a number to that is also a good way. Like, oh no, like I'm a couple years sober now. People say like, oh okay, but in that moment, it's always even more. You're like, no man, I've got like a month sober or something. I don't want to mess that up. I'm doing something else. Um, so that's a good way. And then another way, and this is just like so practical, is to have something else in your hand. Like I drink a ton of seltzers now. Like if you have one in your hand, it's easy to say
Sure.
like, oh no, I'm good. I got this. Right. And you can
Yes,
just
yes.
bring them with you. Right.
Mm,
You don't want to show up to a party empty handed anyway.
mm. I think there is a lot of self criticism. And I've
Yeah.
spoken to people before that have stopped drinking and they said, I kind of just lie. Some people have said they just lie to people at social gatherings, like, oh, no, I don't drink. I'm driving. I've got to drive.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'm not, but I think that only lasts a certain amount of time. And this is the next topic I want to get into is the topic of acceptance. And I think having to do that shows that you are having a hard time accepting yourself, accepting the situation and the circumstance that you're in.
Hmm.
And you don't want to let anyone in on your insecurity because you feel like for some reason, somehow, maybe they won't respect you as much or they'll look down upon you. That's basically the same thing. But for some reason, you will feel like you're losing some sort of social standing with people. Um, and then, of course, the topic of acceptance ties into there's no silver bullets, right? Full
Yeah.
circle. And
Yeah.
all the issues that we have in life that they come up. And I think so much of the suffering that people experience comes from the things that they want and the things they expect that they don't have right now.
Hmm.
Which goes back to my story about the Buddha as well. How have you found the best way to practice acceptance of yourself? It sounds like you were quite accepting of yourself with this issue with the drinking, and quite open to it, which I think is great. It's really brave, I think, actually, and good for you for doing that. I think it's definitely the best way to go, being very open, honest about it. But how have you practiced that acceptance of your own self and then of those things in your life too?
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say. I think for me, one of the biggest things to accept was that, and this goes, we were talking about being selfish a little bit before, and I think one of the issues that I had is I felt like I always put myself last, right? Like I wanted to take care of my kids. I wanted to do, like I felt like, oh, like if you have some problem, like come to me, like I'm strong enough to not just take care of my problems, but take care of yours too. But in this process, it found like, it's sort of like, you get on an airplane. Every time you're on the airplane, the flight attendants tell you like, hey, when the oxygen mask comes down, put yours on first, then help somebody else. And they do that because if you don't put yours on, then you will pass out. And then you will not be able to help anybody else. And I don't think that's just true on the airplane. I think that's true in our lives too. And, I kind of grew up in a blue collar house where, leadership was always putting yourself last and everybody else first. And I don't think it served me very well. And one of the things that I needed to accept that it was okay for me to have some self-care. And I was worthy of those and worthy to take a little time to make sure that I could take care of myself. Because if I wasn't going to take care of myself in that moment, in that hotel, I realized that I wasn't going to be around to help take care of my kids. Like I was headed for divorce, and I came from a family divorce, and it was not good, and I didn't want that, and so I had to accept that it was okay to take a little time for myself. And then when I started building in a routine of writing and things like that, I think I learned a lot more about myself then. And just became a little bit more comfortable accepting the good things I have in my life and the flaws.
I think some people don't want to show weakness because
Oh, for sure.
there's a mistrust, maybe because the experience they've had with people in the past that if they show weakness, if they open up to someone, they get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
How do you navigate that? What would you say to someone if they said, look, like I have to, I can't accept my weaknesses. I can't show any weakness because if I do, then someone's going to capitalize on that and they're going to use it against me. What would you say to someone?
Question. Yeah, good question. Well, what I have found is that being rigid, it's actually much more fragile than being a little bit vulnerable and a little soft, right? Here's a metaphor. Speaking of no silver bullets, right? Okay. Shoot a bullet into glass. The glass will break, right? But bulletproof vests work by absorbing, right? They're vulnerable. They flow around. They catch bullets. They catch danger instead of putting up a firm wall, which shatters. And it can take strength to be vulnerable for sure, but it's the thing that makes you stronger at the end of the day. I broke because I refused to be vulnerable and I refused to be flexible. My rigidity, super did me because I was like unwilling to show any weakness. And it's a facade that people see through. You don't think they do, but they see through. They know.
The scene at the end of the movie 8 Mile comes to mind. Actually,
Right. Yeah. It's a great one. Yeah.
When Eminem is he can't. I guess he can't accept himself. He doesn't like where he comes from.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end, he integrates all of that and becomes completely vulnerable and says, "Yeah, this is me. I'm fucked up. I'm fucked up. I'm a mess. All these insecurities, all these weaknesses. But guess what? I accept them. Now, what are you going to do? Like, what have you got against me that I don't already know?" And that, man, I think that's a superpower. But I think you can't dip a toe into that because it doesn't really work. It's a bit of a leap to go to that point, but I think to be completely vulnerable uh, allows you to surpass those things then. There's a great quote from Maxwell Maltz, the author of the book Psycho-Cybernetics, which is all about self-image and how your self-image changes the results you get in life, the things that you end up doing. But he talks about acceptance. He says, if you can't accept yourself for where you are right now, then you won't see opportunities because you won't believe yourself as deserving of them. When you can't accept yourself where you are with your weaknesses, there's still some sort of twang of you can't probably like care and love yourself
Yeah.
if you can't accept those weaknesses, because there's a fragmentation. So how can you be completely all in on something and believe in your true potential, I think, if there's something about you that you don't like and you want to close it off, you want to push it down, you want to bury it. And often that thing just grows and grows and grows until you get to a point where it nearly creates a catastrophe in your life. And then the fear and the pain associated with burying that thing becomes greater than the fear of confronting it and actually integrating it and being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think so many of us have to wait for a crisis to happen, to occur.
Yeah. Yeah.
For you, your cancer story is obviously quite a big theme as well for the last few years. And how have you dealt with that? Do you think that the things you learned in recovery have helped you through that? And if so, how? In what way?
I mean, I think it's the only thing that helped me get through it. Yeah, I had a rare cancer and I found out about it in the week I was supposed to graduate from rehab. Uh, and yeah, I mean, talk about there's sort of like it's not like an urban legend, but people just say like you'll be tested on your way out of rehab. Like something will happen and you'll be tested. And that was mine, man. And that's like, that is a relapse scenario made by an evil person, like if, in a laboratory, like an evil villain, like bent on getting people to relapse would come up with this scenario, right? But the tools that I had put together in the 98 days from the time I stopped drinking to the time I found a tumor was like helped me get through all of the tests to surgeries, losing a shoulder blade and everything else without drinking. And yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons why I like, man, these tools are incredibly powerful. Like I went through a pretty extreme example of how they can help somebody through it, but it doesn't take, you don't, they could help you if you just with like run of the mill issues too. And so I'm so grateful that I was able to, that I had to go to rehab before they found the cancer, because I think, I'm not sure what would have happened the other way around, like the stress that came with my cancer diagnosis, massive. And I would have dragged my way through it for sure.
Yeah. I find there to be a lot of grace in recovery, especially. And you've heard of it's a parable from the Bible about the shepherd leaving the 99
Keep telling
to
me.
find.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, the parable of the shepherd and the 99. So the shepherd has 100 sheep,
Hmm.
and one of them goes missing, and it loses its way, and it strays from the flock, and it gets lost in the wilderness, and it's lost, can't find its way, and it's probably going to die. It's having a
Hmm.
hard time,
Yeah.
and the shepherd leaves the 99 sheep that he knows are fine. They're fine. I'm going to leave them to go and find the one.
Yeah. Yeah.
In your recovery, are you uh, spiritually inclined? You're agnostic or atheist? In your recovery, have you noticed any more graceful synchronicities, things like that?
Um, yeah, good. Yeah, good question. You know, I've really sort of leaned more into relationships with people uh,
Mm.
to help me get through it. Then, that's sort of I don't go to AA meetings anymore. I did. It's part of my recovery for a little while, but it just wasn't my vibe.
Hmm.
Um, and I had a system that I put together for myself that works for me. And, kind of recovery is sort of like, like skinning a cat. I guess there's like 1,000 ways to do it, or more than one for sure. And, but I certainly used like family as the thing greater than myself. Uh, yeah,
Cool.
it's about kind of the connections with my family first and foremost, but then certainly my friends and everything else too. But I found that to be one of the biggest motivators for me.
What are the biggest shifts in yourself and your day-to-day life that you have found from doing this, what I would call inner work, and working on yourself and developing yourself in this way? What are a
Oh
few of the
man,
biggest things that you would point
yeah.
to and say, this is a transformed experience? This is so different from before.
So the biggest thing was to kind of recognize my needs, right? So uh, in the height of my addiction, like family would go to bed and then I would stay up and have a bunch of drinks, right? As a
Mm,
way to decompress is how I would have put it then, right?
mm,
And what I found was that what did I like about that time other than the drink? Well, it was like some peaceful quiet that I had to myself. And so I just engineer that in my day and I flip it by waking up early, right? And so I
mm-hmm.
started waking up just like 15 minutes early so I could write my journal. And then I thought, man, this is great. Like if I got up like a little earlier, I could exercise too. And I was like, oh man, that's great. And so I just started waking up just a little bit earlier and a little bit earlier, and now I have a pretty solid morning routine it's more of a ritual than a routine really. And but that quiet time is important for me, and so I take so I yeah so I wake up early, and I journal, exercise, shower, get a little work done, and then that way, no matter what happens in the day, I'm okay. Like I've taken care of
Mm,
the most important things up front when I have the most control, right? It's a big mantra in recovery, control what you can control, and I can control that
mm-hmm.
time. And then once other people start to enter your life, you lose more and more control, right? Uh,
Yes.
it's like the more people you're connected with, the more kind of chaos but in a good way, ultimately
Yeah.
it's healthy, but there's a lot of everybody has dreams and desires and opinions, and they don't all mesh together the way that you would have set it up yourself. And so if I can get myself if I can get my mind right and my body straight in the morning, then I'm better equipped to deal with whatever will come to me that day.
great. And of course, if you were up late having drinks, the waking up early
Yeah.
wouldn't happen.
No, it wouldn't happen. And I would just wake up to chaos. And I did for a long time, just wake up into chaos, right? Like wake up to a kid just jumping on me. Like, boom, you're in it. The chaos has started. Let's go, right? And I didn't function very well that way.
Mm. So it's kind of like taking some steps in some direction to, you got to cut the drinking. And once you cut the drinking, then it gives some more room for some more positive actions. And once you start replacing those things out, the positive spiral starts happening.
Yeah.
And it gets easier and easier, and you feel better and better. And then it's easier to not drink, and it's easier to do the positive things.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Listen, I don't mean to cut it off, but I do have another one in 2 minutes.
Good to talk to you, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Really enjoyed our conversation. And I'll let you know when it's up.
Oh, yeah, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, Troy.
Yeah. Did it cut it? Yeah. I don't know. We're good.
Enjoy the rest of your day. See you, man.
I will, man. Thank you so much.